Weather staying mainly dry across the UK tonight, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Dominic Ellis.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. Nigel Farage's proposals for abolishing settled leave to remain in this country, and presumably therefore deporting hundreds of thousands of people who have arrived here legally and have been here for many years, are nothing short of revolutionary. The numbers are enormous. By the end of last year, there were about 430,000 people with indefinite leave to remain in Britain. According to the government, there are more than 200,000 of them claiming some kind of benefits. Oh yes, and there are nearly 6 million EU citizens in the UK who have got post-Brexit rights to be here, but are not covered by this particular reform policy at all. But enough of all the numbers. Who are these people? How long have some of them been here? Are they working? Where are they working? How much tax do we get from them? It's very hard to get answers. Reform talks of low-wage workers with dependence on benefits and claims that deporting many people, and remember, we are not talking here about illegal immigrants, would save more than £200 billion in welfare payments. Other parties say this is nonsense, but presumably the welfare savings would be big. For now, I just want you to imagine hundreds of thousands of people who've been living here peaceably and quietly, working away, being arrested and forcibly expelled from this country. I want you to think about the businesses instantly shuttered, all the places where experienced people suddenly vanish, their homes emptied, the childhood friendship groups broken up, the neighbours up in arms. I want to ask, where does this end? Is it too much to say blood on the streets? Now, I have a problem tonight I want to share with you. Reform themselves simply won't put anyone up to discuss this. But this story is too big just to shrug, report and move on from. It is, as I say, a revolutionary proposal put before the British people. And now to one of the most prominent British Indian businessmen of all, the founder of Cobra beer, former president of the CBI, Lord Karan Bilimoria. Karan, very good to have you on the show. A lot of this is directed against the so-called Boris wave of post-Brexit migrants. And I've looked at the numbers, and they're overwhelmingly from India, Pakistan, Nigeria and China, whereas the white European migrants from the EU are not covered at all. Are you concerned about this?
I'm extremely concerned, Andrew. This is a development that's come completely out of the blue. And the problem here is that immigration as a topic is just top of the agenda, but it's top of the agenda for absolutely the wrong reasons, and understandably so, with the illegal immigration coming across the channel and the boats and the tragedies that result. Nobody wants that. But that whole picture of immigration is that picture of people coming across on boats seeking asylum and illegal immigration. The reality is the vast majority of immigration in this country is legal immigration, whether it's people coming on the points-based system, whether it's people genuinely seeking asylum. And that is the immigration that this country, particularly on the points-based system, all our sectors of the economy desperately need. And this proposal by reform, can you imagine the figures for a start? Where did this £234 billion in the coming years come from? They're already backtracking on that calculation. What about the fairness of this, of the genuine people who've worked here, who have the right for indefinite leave to remain? That you can't retrospectively take that away from them. Well, and when you have a country that does things retrospectively, that sends alarm bells around the world. But is this a country we can trust when they will just come in and change laws going backwards?
Well, I did want to ask you about Britain's reputation if this happened, because these are people who had, as it were, a kind of deal with the British government. They had been made an offer, they had agreed the offer, and they had shaken hands on it. And now it would be suddenly taken away. What effect would that have around the world? What effect would it have, particularly, for instance, in India?
Well, this country is always seen as a country that has been fair, that is just, that it never, ever will do something that is incorrect. Our justice system, our courts, our lawyers are respected around the world. And it's this whole sense of truth and fairness and justice that underpins it. We can't lose that. And look at all the good immigration. Where would this economy be without, for example, the Indian community, which I come from? 2 million people in this country, the largest ethnic minority population in this country. And they're reaching the very top, whether it's prime ministers, business leaders, politicians, doctors, lawyers, you name it. Without their contribution, we wouldn't be the 6th largest economy in the world. So we've got to value the good immigration that instead of constantly looking at the bad immigration, which of course we need to deal with, but not with instruments that reform are suggesting.
Well, reforms say, and I'm sure they're right about this, that there are many recent immigrants who are low-skilled, low-paid, have dependents, and are costing the country a lot. But there are, as you have suggested, presumably a lot of people who have come here, built up businesses, created wealth for themselves and their neighbours. If they were all suddenly removed, what would be the effect on British business?
Well, the effect would be huge because we've got an aging population for a start. And if you look at our figures, that is going down. So we need immigration, whether we like it or not, we need immigration. And we need to control that immigration. We need to make sure we get the immigration that the sectors of our economy needs. And there are still labor shortages. Unemployment is going up, but we still have shortages in many sectors of the economy. What would our NHS do without the doctors from India, without the nurses from India? As one country as an example, let alone all the other countries, the NHS would collapse without foreign doctors and foreign nurses. The construction industry relies hugely. The care industry relies hugely. Agricultural workers. We need agricultural workers every single season. Otherwise, our crops would rot in the fields. So we need immigration. We need the good immigration. Let's not have these huge measures that reform are suggesting, which would be very unfair.
Lord Bilimoria, thank you very much for talking to LBC tonight. And now for his reflections on the impact this kind of policy could have on the economy, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray. James, as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, presumably you can help me a bit, if not in detail, with how much tax recent migrants are paying into the economy, how much welfare dependency is caused by this. In other words, what would be the sums involved?
I think the truth is, to say up front, we don't really know what reforms plans involve because they're falling apart in front of our eyes. They announced them this morning. I think the data on which it was based was withdrawn or removed from endorsement by the think tank behind it pretty quickly. So, we're speculating about what their policy. But I can actually just address directly your question about what impact this would have. And I think, as well as being a back of fag packet type policy, this would also involve taking people who potentially have families here, who have contributed to society, maybe work in businesses here, and deporting them. And I think this is not the right way to go about it at all.
It would break up families because there would be parents who are here with indefinite leave to remain, but their children born here would be British citizens.
Well, so if you look at the question about indefinite leave to remain, if you look at our policy and our consultation and the immigration white paper to reform indefinite leave to remain, what we're saying is that rather than people being able to have it after 5 years, that should be 10 years. Now, that is a sensible, effective change. What reforms seem to be suggesting in the policy they put out today would deport people, as you say, who have families here, who have contributed to society, who have businesses here. And it's just, it's not the right way to go about this at all.
Would you fear unrest on the streets if this happened?
Well, I don't really want to speculate about what might happen on this policy, which isn't really worth the paper it's written on. I think we should focus on the fact that this policy has clearly come out of Reform's press office, but they haven't even checked how it would work because them being asked questions this morning, it fell apart almost straight away. Well,
you said that huge figure for welfare savings has fallen apart. But nonetheless, the government's own figure suggests that of people with leave to remain, 200,000 people are taking benefits of one kind or another. Surely that would be a massive saving to the taxpayer if they all had to leave.
Well, I think, as I say, this is about speculating about a policy that is falling apart in front of our eyes.
But it's an enormous policy in front of the British people, which has been put there today by a party which, if there was an election today, could very well be the government. So it's speculation, but it's kind of important and relevant speculation.
Well, I think the reason why the question you ask, I think, is relevant is twofold. I think, firstly, people want immigration to be lower, and that is a feeling, I think, felt quite widely across Britain, getting net migration down and obviously dealing with illegal migration. I think at the same time, people want to make sure the welfare system is fair and sustainable. And so both of those issues are ones which matter to the British people, about the welfare system, helping people back into work, about being fair and sustainable. And at the same time, the issue of immigration is important. So the question you asked is the intersection between those two issues, but I think both are important to the British people.
All right. A lot of Nigel Farage's target today was the so-called Boris wave of post-Brexit migrants. Something like 800,000 people in a very short period of time coming into this country. We have never seen anything like this before. Can you reassure people listening that under Labour that would not happen again?
We know that net migration has gone down since Labour won the election. It's lower now than when we won the last general election, and we know that people want it to come down further, and that's what we're focused on. You know, it's about having a sensible, effective policy. I think people, actually under Boris Johnson and other Conservative prime ministers, got fed up of promises being made and then things happening which undermined what they wanted to see happen in this country. And we're determined to take effective measures to get migration down, to get illegal migration down, and to make a difference to people's lives.
And now, today you've announced support for a second runway at Gatwick. Does this mean that growth finally trumps any worries about climate change? If you're worried about climate change, you don't build big new airport runways.
What it means is that we're getting on with something that people have talked about for years and years and years, but haven't managed to get underway. You know, I remember...
What about climate change?
Well, we know the decision that we've taken is consistent with the evidence that we need for meeting our climate change and our environmental obligations. Things like the new sustainable aviation fuels, the new technologies, carbon pricing mechanisms. The decision about growth, the decision about the second runway at Gatwick is consistent with our environmental obligations. And you know, I remember Gatwick having been talked about for years and years and years, and nothing having happened. The same with Heathrow third runway, years and years and years. Nuclear power, people have talked about it for the last 14, 15 years under the previous government. We've gone into office and said, we're actually going to get on with it. You know, and I know that means that we're taking some decisions which others have ducked away from and have refused to take. But we're building the third runway at Heathrow, the second runway at Gatwick, nuclear power stations. It's actually driving growth, which will increase jobs and prosperity across the country.
All right, James Murray, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, thank you very much indeed for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, our political correspondent, Aggie Chambre, was in the room this morning as Nigel Farage gave his press conference on all of this, and she's with me in the studio now. This is, whether it's falling apart or it's not falling apart, this is the boldest and most incendiary policy in the sense that Nigel Farage has yet produced.
I mean, it's absolutely monumental. And I think sitting in the room, journalist after journalist was asking questions and just trying to get to grips with whether this could actually happen. Questions about whether this could be a repeat of Windrush, potentially. Questions also that were answered
presumably an anti-Windrush,
well, exactly. And questions about whether or not this could actually happen. And questions about, well, hang on, you said last night, Zia Youssef, of course, a top reform politician, saying last night that any foreign-born national would not get welfare. But then that actually wasn't quite true, because they then went on to answer that if you have EU settled status, then you would...
And it's not only just not a little bit true, there are 6 million people that forgets.
Exactly, and I think it's 10% of people that use universal credit are EU settled status, and only 3% are kind of not EU, non-EU. So lots and lots of questions. But I also had to ask about the business. So I said, have you done any modelling on how many businesses would close as a result of this? And if you have, how many businesses would close?
I wonder how many businesses have closed. I wonder what's happened to genuine growth with this. If you actually have a look at what has happened to UK productivity since Blair launched the mass migration experiment, you will find it has actually been, in productive terms, a disaster for this country. So how many firms that could have prospered haven't? How many have gone bust that shouldn't have done? It's led to a change of culture that has been ruinous.
I don't know whether you heard an answer there, Andrew, but I'm not sure I worked out there whether or not they had done modelling. Maybe they just didn't want to tell me.
I think the answer is probably no. Can I ask about one other thing, which is the legal aspects of this? Because, you know, this is a contract, as it were, between the state and all these hundreds of thousands of individuals. And if you tear it up, are there not legal challenges? Are there not legal problems with closing businesses, deporting people, getting them out of their houses?
I mean, that was one of the questions that was asked as well. And the answer sort of seemed to be, well, we'll change the law. I mean, if we are the government, we can change the law. Zia Youssef basically saying, you know, it was learned helplessness of Westminster to suggest otherwise.
Do you see in any sense a kind of mimicry of what's going on in Washington at the moment? In other words, a complete centre of power, excluding other forms of, restraint, whether it's the European Court of Human Rights, whatever it might be. We take complete power. We can do whatever we like. It's a new kind of politics.
It's definitely a new kind of politics. And I think, all politicians are looking to America, not necessarily to mimic Donald Trump, but looking at how he is operating. But it is that, as you say, it's sort of, we will leave the European Court of Human Rights, we will leave X, we will leave Y, and we will make this work. And that is very much what they were suggesting this morning. Whether or not that is true or not, we will have to wait and see.
This is a big, big moment. Aggie, James, thank you both very much indeed. And I'd like to hear your thoughts too. Are you one of the people on indefinite leave to remain? And how did it make you feel, if so, hearing Nigel Farage's comments this morning? Please text me on 84850 or email mar@lbc.co.uk. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has been accused of rewarding terrorism with his decision to recognise a Palestinian state. In a few minutes, we'll hear from a man who has lost 2 of his family members to the hands of Hamas. You are listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr, and the time now, 6:17.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why this staggering level of incompetence?
Straight to the point.
This is the economics of the madhouse from this government.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
But she does seem to struggle with her sums.
Listen on Global Player or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
The United Kingdom, along with Canada, Australia, France and many other Western countries, has now recognised the existence of a Palestinian state, whose flag today flies proudly outside a Palestinian embassy. But in a sense, we are recognising a ghost, a desperate hope for the future, and calling it a contemporary modern state. Keir Starmer says Hamas is a terrorist organisation which can have no future or role in government. But because Hamas is so intertwined with Palestinian life in Gaza, how can he know that, and how could he enforce it? Meanwhile, Israeli settlers, backed by their government, push forward and grab Arab land in the West Bank to make sure there can never be a viable Palestinian state. They say they can do this because it's called Judea and Samaria and was given to them exclusively by God some time back. I regard that with the same absolute bewilderment I feel when I hear Muslim imams demanding that everyone submit to Allah. Public service reminder. This is 2025. Let's start by hearing Hussam Zomlet, now the Palestinian ambassador, speaking earlier today.
It is about ending the denial of the Palestinian people's inalienable right to freedom and self-determination. And it is an acknowledgement of a historic injustice. Ladies and gentlemen, Palestine exists. It has always existed, and it always will.
But of course, it is absolutely not the case that all Israelis will see this as a victory for Hamas, whatever the press here claims. A little earlier on, I spoke to Gil Dickmann, whose aunt was killed by Hamas on October the 7th and whose cousin was a hostage killed by Hamas later on. What did he think of the claims that this recognition by the British government is rewarding the terrorists who have caused his family so much grief?
Well, first of all, let me say that even though I lost my cousin and my aunt, I actually still believe in the two-state solution. I believe the Palestinians deserve their own state and the Israelis deserve their own state, and the only solution is the two-state solution. But I think right now a recognition of a Palestinian state might look to Hamas as a reward for the war and a reward for October 7th. And actually, Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, is using this as an excuse to keep on fighting. So I'm not really sure this is the actual solution right now. What we need is not a recognition or a declaration, but we need is action and an actual deal between the two sides, not declarations.
Well, let me ask about what's going on the ground, because it's pretty clear that the most extreme right-wing members of the Netanyahu government are pushing very hard for further settlements in the West Bank, what they call Samaria and Judea, on the basis that this was land given to the Jewish people by God and that therefore the Palestinians have no right to be there. This is not Arab land, never was, never can be, and they should be pushed out. That kind of thinking, how rooted is it in Israeli society?
I must tell you, most Israelis don't think that. Most Israelis don't believe that a peace process or a peace initiative between Israel and Palestine is really doable in the foreseeable future. But they won't say that we have to transfer all Arabs from Judea and Samaria. This is a very extremist kind of thinking. But we're amidst war right now, and things are that's another reason why I think the most urgent thing is to put an end to this war, not only to get the hostages back, but to stop all these extremists from talking about their extreme programs for the future.
This is a very important moment for optimism. So do you think that it is possible that in the future we will see a Palestinian state involving Gaza and what we now call the West Bank under a non-Hamas-led leadership, without Hamas being involved at all?
I think this is the only possible solution, because after what happened on October 7th, you can't let a terror organization still rule so many million people. They don't deserve that, and we don't deserve that. And I don't believe that the Palestinians should live under Israeli rule. So the only option, the only viable option, is a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine. This is going to happen. That's the end. This is what's going to happen in the end. And that's why I think we need to try and proceed towards this kind of solution. And the way would be to, first of all, get this war over with, and then start building bridges of peace between the two peoples. It's not about declarations.
It doesn't seem likely that this will happen under Benjamin Netanyahu. Are we going to have to wait until after another election in Israel and perhaps a new government?
Well, I must tell you, I did not vote for Benjamin Netanyahu, and I really believe that he is leading Israel deliberately into an endless war. That's what he sees. That's his own political future in his mind, that the only way he can stay and remain in power is by just continuing to fight forever. I believe we as Israelis deserve a better leader and a better government, and all the region deserve this kind of government. But what I put in the focus as a person, as a relative of a hostage who was murdered in captivity, is not to replace Netanyahu, but to end the war. And I think that President Trump can implement this end of war on Netanyahu if he decides to. And Netanyahu might not want it, but he might be left without a choice.
Very interesting. Final point, Gil, if I may. As somebody who lost so many members of your own family in the hostage and October the 7th and the hostage situation after that, what's your feeling about, there must be, let's hope and pray there are still some hostages left alive inside Gaza City, and yet the assault on Gaza City goes on with complete ferocity. What's your feeling about that?
Well, we know that there are hostages still alive in Gaza. We just received a video of Alon Ohel, a hostage who is alive in Gaza City. And we know that this military pressure is putting his life at risk. And that's actually what killed my cousin 1 year ago. It was the same thing in Rafah. They applied military pressure. Israel applied military pressure, and she was murdered in captivity because of that. That's why we're telling our government, we're not seeking revenge. That's not the most important thing right now. Most of the people of Israel, most of Bibi's own voters are saying, end this war and get the hostages home. It's not worth it to keep on fighting and to actually lose the hostages. We're fighting to save them. We're fighting to restore peace. Let's do it, get this over with, and then we can start rebuilding.
Gil Dickmann, an incredibly important New Year message. Thank you very much for talking to LBC. Question. If you water down oil, do you get anything useful? There have been multiple reports denied by the government that the Climate Change Secretary Ed Miliband is to water down the pledge in his party's manifesto not to issue new licences for oil and gas fields in the North Sea by allowing so-called tiebacks, the development of oil fields next door to current ones. Now, that would delight corporate Britain and also the trade unions involved, but it would depress climate change campaigners greatly. Now, one such campaigner is with me now, Alethea Warrington, head of Aviation, Energy and Heat at the climate charity Possible. Alethea, welcome to the studio. First of all, we don't know if this is going to happen or not, but if the government did, as it were, renege on the promise of no new oil and gas licences, how serious would that be?
I think that would be really, really serious. It would be a real step back for the climate. It would be going back on the commitment in their election manifesto to be a climate leader. But it would also demonstrate a really worrying level of economic illiteracy. The remaining oil and gas in the North Sea is going to be very, very expensive to extract. It's going to push up energy prices. And I think after the energy cost crisis over the last few years, the last thing that any of us need is more dirty, expensive, volatile oil and gas. And really, the government has an opportunity here to do the right thing, to keep going forwards with the transition to renewables, more wind, more solar, clean, cheap energy.
What about the argument you hear a lot that in the transition to completely carbon-free energy, we are still going to need oil and gas for quite a while, and that therefore, as Keir Starmer himself has said, we might as well get it, from locally, from nearby, and that actually, in terms of the climate, it's worse for the climate to buy oil and gas from somewhere at the other end of the world and have it transported here.
I think that's sort of asking the wrong question, really. The government shouldn't be thinking, how can we most economically stay on oil and gas for as long as possible? They should be thinking, how can we power forwards with the transition and demonstrate maximum ambition on getting onto renewable energy?
But isn't there a clean energy side to this as well? In other words, if we buy our oil and gas from somewhere in Europe or America or wherever, and it's transported here, it's actually worse for the climate than if we just pump it in from locally from the North Sea.
The thing is, we're already drilling in the North Sea. What this question is about isn't should we stop that immediately and start importing oil and gas. It's for how long should we do this, and the government is trying to extend that time frame.
All right, well, let's turn to one thing we do know, which is the second runway in Gatwick. Your response? I
think this is really, really, it's a terrible step for the climate. It's going to be a huge increase in emissions. And it's going to be really, really bad economically as well. And trying to move forwards with this in the face of the UK's absolutely gigantic tourism spend deficit demonstrates a really worrying level of economic incompetence from this government.
The Treasury Minister I was talking to just now said that because of green aviation fuels, this was consistent with their energy policy.
I don't think that really stacks up at all, unfortunately. So-called sustainable aviation fuels were at a very, very early stage of development. There are very serious concerns that they're not scalable, and they're certainly going to be extremely expensive. So the more you try to expand aviation, the more of this stuff you theoretically need. It's not going to be available on that scale, but it will push up prices for passengers.
So in your view, they're an excuse, not an answer?
I think they're greenwashing, quite honestly. I just don't think they're going to work at all. And while they don't work, the aviation industry will be using that as an excuse for all these dangerous expansions, these new runways.
Right. Alethea Warrington, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to me. The Liberal Democrat conference is underway in Bournemouth, an event I think it's fair to say Reform tried to overshadow with their controversial migration announcement this morning. I will be speaking with a former leader of the Lib Dems. The time now is 6:31, and here is Dominic Ellis with your news headlines.
France is preparing to follow the UK and several other nations in recognising a Palestinian state. It's due to make the announcement when world leaders gather for the UN General Assembly in New York later. A leading British entrepreneur has told LBC that Reform UK's plans to overhaul the legal migration system would damage Britain's reputation. Lord Karan Bilimoria also told Tonight with Andrew Marr abolishing indefinite leave to remain status would have serious consequences for UK business. And 5 charities have dropped the Duchess of York as patron over a leaked email that she sent to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Sarah Ferguson apologised to Epstein for publicly disowning him days after reports of his crimes emerged in 2011. LBC weather staying mainly dry across the UK tonight. A few showers in the far southeast, lows of 7 degrees.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
So Keir Starmer's decision to recognise the state of Palestine, terrorism seems to have won. A Labour MP and Minister for the Middle East and North Africa, Hamish Falconer, who joins me now. You will be aware, I imagine, that Hamas has said this is a victory for the justice of our cause. So your government, the Prime Minister, has appeased terrorists.
Let me tell you what Hamas's cause is.
No, why don't you respond to that respectfully, sir?
OK, Nick, I would treat Hamas's statements on this with the same scepticism that you would treat any of their other statements. Their cause is one state, a violent state between the river and the sea. 2 states
and you've
is
just
defeat
provided
for
justice
Hamas.
for it.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player and the LBC app. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:34. In Parliament, they are a mighty force. For a lot of disillusioned Labour voters, they are a refuge. Their leader is famous for his stunts. Many of us would struggle to list their policies, and their conference by the beach in Bournemouth was rather overshadowed this morning by the latest Farage announcement we have already talked about. I am discussing, and you guessed it long ago, the Liberal Democrats. How should they respond to reform? Let's talk next to one of their former leaders, Tim Farron, who appeared on the stage yesterday draped in the Union flag, telling members we will not have our history, our heritage and our home stolen by the poison of nationalism. What's his reaction to the Farage announcement today?
Yeah, not very patriotic. It feels to me like the attempt that the Reform Party was trying to make to appear sort of moderate with, maybe answering the public's concerns about migration. They have misread the mood of the public. The fact is that there are many people who come to this country, have indefinite leave to remain, and they serve in our community in all sorts of different professions, the care sector, hospitality and tourism, the NHS, in education, industry as a whole. This would be a revolutionary change, but not for the better. It would leave Britain much poorer. It would mean a massive reduction in the number of people paying taxes in this country. That would reduce our ability to be able to afford pensions, the health service, the army, you name it. This is Farage going towards the Tommy Robinson route rather than looking like he might want to one day be a Prime Minister.
Wouldn't it nonetheless slash the welfare bill pretty dramatically, if not by the figures they're saying, at least quite a lot?
Well, given that the majority of people are talking about pay taxes, it'll do the opposite. It'll raise the welfare bill, or rather, it will reduce the ability for us to be able to afford it. And when we talk about the welfare bill, I'm talking about pensions as well, our ability to support people who have worked very hard throughout their lives and be able to live at least a vaguely comfortable retirement, hopefully more than vaguely comfortable. We can only afford that if we've got a working age population that's paying taxes. Nigel Farage has either not done the maths here and showed himself to be incompetent to be anywhere near government, or he has done the maths and he doesn't care because he doesn't think he's going to win.
Of all the major parties, your one is probably the one least worried about borders and least worried about migration. What do you say to people listening? Say, well, that's all very well, but the government has lost control. There is a real problem here. I don't know what the Lib Dems would propose doing about it.
Well, we do want to control our borders. I think the massive majority of the British people want borders that are controlled, an asylum system which is competent and gets the job done, and wants to make sure we're compassionate to people who are genuine refugees. And the fault of this government, and even more so the Tory government that went before it, which of course contained people who are now in the leadership of the Reform Party, their problem is that they allowed the number of people claiming asylum to rack up without processing them. So people who are genuine refugees are left rotting in hostels, and people who are not genuine refugees are not safely returned. A lack of competence is what marks both Labour and the Tories, and indeed now Reform, given that they contain lots of people who are responsible for the Tory failure.
OK, I've been playing a kind of game with myself as your conference has been getting going and watching the number of interviewers and other journalists who have a very easy way of kind of a slam dunk fun question, which is to ask people, so what's your favourite Lib Dem policy, and enjoy the silence that follows. People don't know much about your policies even now.
What's my favourite Lib Dem policy?
What are the two policies from your party that you would really like everybody in the country to know about and understand?
I'd like them to know that we want the water companies to be run by not-for-profit companies so that all the profits that are made are ploughed back into sorting out our sewers and our waterways and cleaning up our lakes and rivers. That's thing one. Thing two, a revolution in building council houses so we have affordable homes for everybody of all ages, no matter their background.
Very good. Well done. You are a former leader of the party, so you ought to have been able to do that. But nonetheless, thank you. Looking forward, it's clear that what's going on in British politics at the moment is that we used to have the right of politics fracturing a bit, splintering. You had the Tories and the Reform Party and all the rest of it. This is now happening to the left of politics as well, with Reform, Jeremy Corbyn, a lot of unhappiness in the Labour Party, and yourselves. In that situation, at a general election, after a general election, you might well be in a position where you had to talk about doing a coalition government with the Labour Party. Is that something you would contemplate?
I mean, the electoral system is kind of obviously not been fit for purpose for many years, but particularly not now. Yeah. It's entirely possible that the next majority government to this...
It's the one we've got.
Well, yes. So what I mean is the next majority government could get like 27% of the vote, and that could get them a majority. So we can't predict anything, can we? I'm not sure I do think it's quite characterised the way you say. I would perhaps point out to you that what we've got is reformist, or rather populist parties, and those populist parties include Jeremy Corbyn's, whatever it's called today, and Nigel Farage's. Populism of the left and the right are very simple, or very similar, I should say. They are people providing simplistic solutions to complex problems, and any grown-up watching this knows full well they're not to be trusted in that case. And then you've got people who have failed, the Tories and Labour, and you've got the Liberal Democrats in a position, almost a unique position, seeking to be grown-up, seeking to be decent, seeking to be patriotic without being nationalistic, and seeking instead to come up with honest answers to the nation's problems without leading people astray.
Tim, fluent and interesting, but sadly not an answer to the question I asked you, which was, would you go into coalition with Labour or not?
I don't even know who will be in Parliament at the next election. I mean, it's entirely possible the two main parties could be left with 0 MPs. How are we going to deal with either of them?
It's unlikely, nonetheless. I come back one more time. Are there any circumstances in which you would help prop up a Keir Starmer government in the future?
There are circumstances in which the Liberal Democrats would want to be in power, and the question is whether anybody wants to prop us up, because I think where we're in is a situation where you've got a populist Reform party, you've got a populist left-wing Corbyn party, and a desperate need for somebody decent who might actually want to run the country, provide actual solutions. Now, if we fall short of a majority and other people want to help us, you better ask them.
Tim Farron, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Andrew.
Now, we've spent a big chunk of this programme talking about the reform deportation policy, and I make no apology for that. It's a really, really big moment. But there have been voices that have been missing, which is the people actually concerned by this, the people with indefinite leave to remain, the people who might be most affected. I asked for texts and messages earlier on, and some such people have been in touch, and I make, again, no apology for reading a couple of those out now. This is an anonymous text. He says, "Hi, Andrew. I'm a German national who arrived in the UK back in 1979. I have never not worked, never claimed any benefits. For the last 20 years, I've been a high-rate taxpayer, retired as of this year. Now I'm paying taxes on my personal pension. What is being proposed by reform is hugely unsettling, disappointing and sad for all of us legal immigrants. Makes me want to leave the country of my own accord." Paul says, "Andrew, my family have indefinite leave to remain. We've been in the UK since 2018. My wife and I have 6 degrees between us. We came to the UK as my wife was offered a post at one of the UK's leading universities. I have 2 master's degrees and work as a social work team manager with my local authority. We have 2 children and we have claimed the child benefit we are legally eligible to receive. We are also white, English-speaking Americans. We are a law-abiding family and have spent absolute thousands in immigration fees over the years, in addition to taxes, national insurance, etc. The policy announcements by Reform and Labour today have led my family to apply for citizenship immediately." 2, I think, really interesting messages. Now, I raised the question earlier on about what the practical effect would be of Britain's decision to recognise a Palestinian state. It gives them an embassy and a flag outside and a boost to everyone's confidence, but will it actually advance the cause of peace on the ground? Now, somebody who understands the legal basis of all of this very well indeed is the international human rights lawyer Philippe Sands, who joins me now. Philippe, I hope you can hear me. Can I ask you, first of all, your reaction to the announcement that Britain has at last formally recognised the Palestinian state?
Well, I personally welcomed the move. 147 countries had already recognised a Palestinian state, and the UK was a bit of a laggard. It is essentially a political issue. It's not really a legal issue. States are free to recognise or not recognise, but it will have political consequences, and it will also have legal consequences.
Well, I'm very interested about those legal consequences because, after all, very little relatively of the territory that would be the Palestinian state is actually in the control of any Palestinians at all at the moment.
Well, a lot of it is in the control of Palestinians, but that is a shared control, in particular on the occupied Palestinian territories of the West Bank, with Israeli settlers with the support of the Israeli government. And in Gaza, of course, there is a major conflict taking place. And so I think it's hard to say that anyone's in control of that territory. But the crucial point is, what are the territorial boundaries? And there are accepted territorial boundaries. Palestine has already become a party to many international treaties because many countries have recognized its statehood. So it has a territory, and the fact that that territory is partly being occupied, in a sense, is neither here nor there. It's no different from Ukraine.
Well, let me ask you about the politics, since you raised that. We've now got a lot of Western countries, Britain, France, Australia, Canada, and so on, who are recognising Palestine. That leaves America as the really big question. We still seem to be a very, very long way away from any kind of recognition or anything like that from the Trump administration. Doesn't that mean the entire project is virtuous but frankly toothless?
Well, I don't know if it's either. It will have significant consequences in terms of putting Israel and Palestine on an equal footing for those who recognize Palestinian statehood. And so that is why it's opposed by some people in the Israeli context, because they worry that with a Palestinian state rather than a Palestinian entity, they will now be forced to treat Palestine in effect, as an equal, and that is what they'll have to do as a matter of international law. It also is going to make it much more difficult politically in terms of annexing territory, in terms of occupying territory, when you're dealing with a state that is recognized. And Britain and France and Canada and Australia will now, be submitted to requirements of international law in how they deal with Israeli actions, and that will have political as well as legal consequences.
But not necessarily benign ones. I mean, you've got Messrs. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir who are using this as an excuse for another big grab of land in the West Bank to try and make any possible Palestinian state in the future completely unviable, so that it could have, as it were, exactly the opposite consequences of the kind that Keir Starmer and others would like.
Well, I've never been of the view that doing the right thing is not a path to be followed just because of all of the consequences it's going to generate. I mean, these characters are going to do what they do, frankly, irrespective of any legal niceties, any broader political considerations. I mean, the main rationale for doing it now is that it keeps what's called the two-state solution alive, the idea that there will be one day two states living in peace side by side. And that's why I've said the main consequence is political. But your point is significant about the United States. Until the United States supports a Palestinian state, they can veto Palestinian membership of the United Nations and of various other organizations. And so that will continue to be a big issue. But frankly, the United States is pretty isolated on this issue now. And at some point, that will have consequences.
Well, we'll see. Philippe Sands, thank you very much indeed. Interesting as always. Now, President Trump described Charlie Kirk as a martyr for America's freedom during his memorial last night. We're going to talk about the condition of free speech in the United States in just a few minutes, but the time now is 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Recognising a Palestinian state, will this help bring about a ceasefire? And will it persuade Hamas to release the remaining hostages? Those surely are the two key questions.
Ian Dale on LBC. Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:49. Now, I don't know if you saw the vast stadium farewell for the murdered MAGA leader, Charlie Kirk. His widow said she forgave his killer. Donald Trump, who embraced her, was honest enough to say he did not forgive his enemies. He wanted to harm them. And of the latest news on Joe Biden spreading cancer, he said, if you feel sorry for him, don't feel so sorry, because he's vicious. It's the kind of thing that if it was said by the other side, the liberal critics of the Trump administration, might now result in cancellation or worse, because there seems to be a cultural war going on against the left in America. Let's talk now to David Sirota, co-writer of Don't Look Up, the film satirising climate change denial, and indeed a former speechwriter to Bernie Sanders. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, David. How does it feel at the moment to be on the liberal side of the conversation in America? Is there a real sense that Trump is using the big corporations who dominate the big channels and the big news organizations to crack down on anyone he disagrees with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I would put it into necessarily a left-right paradigm. I would put it into anybody questioning the Trump administration at all, or anybody reporting critically on the Trump administration. I think if you do not like what is going on in the current federal government, in the United States and you are speaking out about it or thinking about speaking out about it, I certainly think the message from the U.S. government, the current Trump regime, is very clear that it is a risky endeavor to you legally, politically, and otherwise. I mean, I think that when we have crossed over now into a paradigm in which it's not just that if you criticize the Trump administration, the Trump movement will criticize you back. It's that Trump is using the power of the government itself to try to send that message, which is very, very different. Free speech does not mean you get to speak out and not be criticized. The free speech, if you say something, somebody else should have a right to criticize you and criticize what you're saying. The assault on free speech is when the government itself says that if you say certain things, the government will use its power, will leverage its power to legally punish you.
Yeah.
And what we saw is Trump using the Federal Communications Commission, for instance, as the most recent example, to threaten ABC and Disney effectively over something a late-night comedian said.
Yes, we've all seen the Jimmy Kimmel story. I'm interested in exactly how this is being done, because, as you say, it's the right to be obnoxious, if you like, whoever you are. It's very important. Without that, there's no First Amendment. There's no nothing. So what's happening to these big corporations? Tell me about Disney, for instance.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Disney is a media company and also a business. Disney, as an example, is looking for regulatory approval for it wants to purchase a large TV streaming company called Fubo. And this is just one of many examples. It has to get Trump Justice Department approval for that purchase. So when a corporation like Disney hears that Trump does not like something that has been said on one of its company's airwaves, ABC, Disney owns ABC. Disney executives now have a financial incentive to try to make Trump happy by changing the editorial content of what it is delivering in its news and entertainment spheres. So Disney is incentivized to do what Trump wants because Trump has shown a penchant for using the government power, in this case the Justice Department, to exert that pressure.
So, David, we saw Trump celebrating the Jimmy Kimmel thing, saying it was all about ratings, he was no good, he was useless. Are there no firewalls around these programs, no firewalls around the newsrooms of the big news shows?
Well, I guess there are supposed to be, but I think we have to go back to the fact that they are businesses. Or put it this way, they are businesses first. The people calling the shots are running businesses. And when you have a president who's saying, if insinuating that merger approval or ability to keep one's broadcast license is conditioned on whether those companies do what the king or what the president wants, it becomes a business decision for these companies.
It's certainly not an open conversational democracy. David, thank you very much indeed. That was David Sirota there, co-writer of Don't Look Up and editor-in-chief of the investigative news outlet The Lever. Charities are running hard in the other direction, away from Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, after she called the sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein her supreme friend. The Natasha Allergies Research Trust is breaking links. So is Julia's House, a children's hospice charity, and 3 others as well. There are some people, some friends, it seems, who are just beyond the pale. Alexander Larman is a journalist and author of the book Windsor's at War. Alexander, thanks for coming on this show. Let's start by thinking a little bit about Fergie herself. She has worked very, very hard since the divorce to reinvent herself.
Yes, Andrew, I think it's fair to say that until relatively recently, most people thought of Sarah Ferguson. I mean, the fact that she has the nickname Fergie, which I think is generally said with affection rather than contempt. I mean, most people have given her a pass as compared to her ex-husband, the Duke of York, because most people think she might not be the brightest button, but she's got a good heart. She's seen somebody who's fundamentally a decent person. And the fact that she worked with the Teenage Cancer Trust for 35 years suggests a real commitment to charitable work. But unfortunately, unfortunately, as you've just said, the email that she sent Jeffrey Epstein was such a poorly judged, such an idiotic thing to do, that the difficulty now is that there is no way that she can continue being a patron of these charities. And on a personal level, this must be devastating for her, because essentially, what does she have apart from these? I mean, certainly it's the public service that she's given most. But you look at these charities and you think, well, they simply cannot be associated with somebody who lied. I mean, that's the only way of saying it, about her association with Epstein. And certainly what's been fascinating over the last few weeks is that we've seen the way that Epstein posthumously first brought down Peter Mandelson, now he's brought down Sarah Ferguson, and the man's evil continues to live on after him. And I think that a lot of people will be looking at what's happened with Fergie, and they'll be feeling very mixed emotions, because I don't see any way that the charities could have acted in any other way that they're doing, and certainly severing links from her is the only thing you can do.
And when the herd moves, the herd moves. I mean, it's very hard to see what she's going to do now. She wrote those books about Fergie, the irritating helicopter, or whatever it was called. It's hard to know what's ahead. But Budgie, the irritating helicopter. And I guess Andrew will be wondering whether there are more emails still to come out for him.
Well, I think what's going to be very difficult for Andrew is that next month Virginia Giuffre's autobiography comes out posthumously, and again there's the sense of the Yorks being threatened from beyond the grave. And if I was Andrew and Fergie, who, as I should note, still living in Royal Lodge together even though they're not married, I'd be looking at one another and thinking, how much worse is it going to get? Because
Absolutely. Alexander Lahmann, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, before I go, regular listeners to the show may remember the case of the Democratic campaigner and human rights activist Alaa Abd El Fattah, who holds both Egyptian and British nationality and who was jailed by the Egyptian regime. His family have begged the British government again and again to intervene, and Keir Starmer's known to have phoned the Egyptian President Sisi at least 3 times. We've spoken to his family many times on the show. Here was his indomitable mother, Leila Swef, who came into the studio last year and told me about the challenges facing her son.
He's hopeless. He doesn't think he's getting out.
He doesn't think.
When we try to talk about the future, he cuts the conversation. When he talks about his son, he says it's a much better plan to behave as if Khalid is an orphan. He is hopeless.
Yes.
And it means that he is down. He's trying to maintain himself for our sakes.
So it's nice to end sometimes with a bit of good news and a round of applause for the Prime Minister, because at long last Allah has been pardoned, and after 6 years he will walk free again. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you want them. You can pause, you can rewind, live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Henry Riley. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that the UK is recognising a Palestinian state. Australia, Canada and France have done the same.
We are clear that Hamas can have no place in the future of Palestine.
For me, there are 2 main questions. Will this help bring about a ceasefire, and will it persuade Hamas to release the remaining hostages? In my opinion, it will embolden the Israeli